I'm 28. My girlfriend, I'll call her Chloe, was 27. We'd been together 3 years, living together for the last 2, in that comfortable, settled way where you stop noticing the relationship is even a thing you're actively choosing anymore. It just is. Sunday pancakes. Terrible reality TV she loved and I tolerated. Her dad inviting me to watch football like I was already family. I thought we were solid. I was the kind of solid where you start quietly looking at rings on your lunch break. Not because you're in a rush, but because it feels like the obvious next chapter. Then, on a random Tuesday over dinner, she put her fork down and asked what I'd think about opening the relationship. I actually stopped chewing. Is there someone specific you want to see? I asked because that felt like the only reason anyone brings that up out of nowhere. No, it's not about anyone else, she said quickly. I've just been reading about it. I think it could be good for us. Help us grow. I don't want us to wake up in 10 years wondering what we missed. I sat with that for a long moment. This was the same woman who once got quietly annoyed because a barista remembered my coffee order too well. Now she was talking about dating other people like she was suggesting a new restaurant. Have you been unhappy? I asked. Because if I missed something... Not at all, she said, reaching across the table for my hand. I love you. I love us. This isn't about that. It's about both of us getting to have new experiences and still coming home to each other. I didn't believe in it. I want to be honest about that from the start. I said yes, but not because I wanted to. I said yes because of how badly she wanted me to, the way she leaned forward, practically willing me to agree, like the conversation would only end one way regardless of what I actually said. Saying no felt like it would just delay the inevitable, not stop it. Okay, I said. If you think it'll be good for us. She lit up immediately, already talking about setting up dating profiles, about ground rules, about a system for letting each other know when we had plans. Details she'd clearly already thought through long before that dinner. That should have told me everything. Didn't, not yet. The next few weeks moved faster than I expected. Chloe built out her profiles with an energy I hadn't seen from her in a long time. Picking photos, writing a bio, even asking me to help take new pictures of her for it. I did it. I don't know why. Some part of me thought going along with it all the way would prove something, maybe to her, maybe to myself. I tried making a profile too. I couldn't finish the bio. Every sentence felt fake. What do you even write? In a relationship but looking for fun. It made me feel slightly sick every time I opened the app, so eventually I just stopped trying. Chloe didn't have that problem. Within a week she had 3 dates lined up. She'd show me the guys' profiles like we were talking about celebrities. He's a personal trainer downtown, we're getting coffee tomorrow, she'd say. Phone practically in my face, and I'd nod and pretend this was a completely normal way to spend a Tuesday. The first time she got dressed up for one of these dates, I felt something drop in my stomach that hasn't fully come back since. A dress I'd never seen. An hour on her makeup. A little twirl in the living room. How do I look? Great, I said, and meant it and hated that I meant it. She came home late that night, humming, texting someone for an hour before she fell asleep. I lay there awake next to her wondering what exactly I'd agreed to. It didn't slow down. Monday it was coffee with the trainer. Wednesday, dinner with some guy from a law firm. Friday, drinks with someone who ran a food truck. I started noticing things about myself I didn't like. Checking the location tags on her Instagram stories. Driving past a restaurant once just to see if she was actually where she said she'd be. She was laughing, hand on some guy's arm, the exact way she used to look at me across a table. The thing that actually broke something in me wasn't even the dates. It was what happened at home. No more cuddling on the couch. Our Sunday pancakes quietly disappeared, replaced by brunch with the girls, which I eventually stopped believing was always just the girls. When I finally brought it up, carefully trying to sound casual, asking if she thought she was going on a lot of dates, she looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. That's the whole point of an open relationship, she said. You should try it too. I can help with your profile if you want. I didn't want help with a profile. I wanted the version of her who used to get excited about a Friday night pizza order. That version seemed to be gone, replaced by someone who was always halfway out the door, dressed for someone else. By week 3, I'd lost count of how many guys there had been. I stopped asking. I started spending more time somewhere else in my head, waiting for her to see how ridiculous this had become. She never did. If anything, she seemed proud of it, like she'd figured out some higher level of living that the rest of us were too boring to understand. And that's around when Megan started coming around more. Megan had been Chloe's best friend since their freshman year of college. Always at our place for movie nights, always the one who showed up with soup when one of us was sick, always the person who made everyone in a room feel like they mattered a little more than they had 5 minutes earlier. She taught kindergarten, which honestly made perfect sense once you knew her. She had that specific patience, that way of actually listening instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. I'd never thought of her as anything more than Chloe's friend. Sure, she was pretty, long dark hair, this easy laugh that filled a room, but she was firmly filed under off-limits in my head, the way a good friend's best friend just is. She dated a guy named Ryan for almost 2 years before they broke up a few months back. And other than that, I honestly hadn't thought much about her love life at all. The first time she came over after all this started, it was to borrow mixing bowls for a cake she was making. Chloe was out, with some new guy, I'd stopped keeping track of the names, and Megan took one look at me and knew something was wrong. "You look terrible," she said, in that direct way of hers. "What's going on?" I hadn't planned on telling her anything. It just came out. The open relationship, the dates almost every night, the way I felt like I was slowly losing my mind watching it happen in real time. Megan sat and actually listened all the way through, without once looking at her phone. "That's not an open relationship," she finally said, shaking her head. "That's just Chloe doing whatever she wants without thinking about how it affects you." Something about hearing someone else say it out loud made me feel less crazy. Less like I was overreacting to something everyone else had decided was fine. After that, Megan started coming by more. Usually on nights Chloe was out. We'd order takeout, watch something mindless, just talk. It became this strange, quiet comfort in the middle of everything falling apart. Having someone who knew both of us, who understood exactly what was happening without me needing to explain it from scratch every time. About a month into Chloe's exploring, Megan came over looking nervous, fidgeting with the necklace she always wore when something was bothering her. "I need to tell you something," she said, sitting on the far end of the couch. "And it might make things weird, but I can't keep not saying it. My stomach did something strange. I think somewhere I already knew. I've had feelings for you for a long time," she said, looking down at her hands. "Since before you and Chloe even got together. But you were with her, and she's my best friend, so I never said anything. I dated Ryan for a while, hoping it would help." She shrugged. "It didn't." I sat there trying to process it. Megan, funny, warm, the person who'd been quietly showing up with soup and honesty while Chloe was out building a rotation of strangers, had felt this way the whole time. How had I never noticed? "You don't have to say anything," she added quickly. "I just needed you to know. Watching her treat you like this the past few weeks, it's been killing me. You deserve better than this." I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time. And somewhere underneath everything, the hurt, the weeks of feeling like a placeholder in my own relationship, something shifted. I want to be honest about what I was thinking in that moment, because it wasn't romantic clarity. It was something closer to a decision. Chloe had spent a month treating me like a safety net, something reliable to come home to after she'd had her fun with whoever she'd picked that week. She never once asked if I was okay with any of it beyond the initial permission. She just assumed I'd still be there. That assumption was her mistake. "Megan," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She leaned in closer. "I'm not going to pretend I thought it through with a clear head. I didn't stop to consider the friendship between them, or how complicated this would make everything downstream. In that moment, none of that outweighed the simple fact that someone was finally choosing me actively instead of keeping me around as a backup plan. We ended up spending the night together. I won't pretend I felt guilt right away. What I felt, lying there afterward, was something closer to relief. Like I could finally breathe normally after weeks of slowly suffocating in an arrangement I never actually wanted. "What are we going to do?" Megan asked eventually, propped up on one elbow watching me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't regret it," she said quietly. "Do you?" I didn't. Not even a little. For the first time since Chloe had dropped that dinner table bombshell, I felt like I could see the situation clearly instead of just drowning in it. I hadn't broken anything that wasn't already cracked. I hadn't betrayed trust that hadn't already been quietly hollowed out, one date at a time. She's going to lose it when she finds out, I said. Probably, Megan agreed. Then, after a pause, isn't it funny how she thinks it's completely fine for her to date whoever she wants, but the idea of you doing the same thing would destroy her? She had a point, and that's when I decided, maybe it was time Chloe understood exactly what she'd been doing to me, from the other side of it. I didn't tell her about Megan right away. I let it sit, let small things slip instead just to watch her reaction. I know how that sounds. After a month of watching her get dressed up for other men without a second thought about how it landed on me, I wasn't feeling particularly generous about being subtle. The morning after, Chloe came home from a girls' night. I had my suspicions about who the girls actually were by then, chatting easily while making coffee. Megan stopped by last night, I said, casual as I could manage. We had a really good talk. Her hand paused over the coffee pot for just a second too long. Megan was here? Yeah, we hung out for a while. She's really easy to talk to. She set her mug down harder than necessary, coffee sloshing over the rim. What did you guys talk about? Just stuff, I said, shrugging. Life, feelings. It was nice. I watched something tighten behind her eyes, the first real crack in the performance she'd been putting on for weeks. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt something other than helplessness. Over the next few days, I kept dropping Megan's name into conversation. Casually, deliberately. How funny she was. How she really got me. How we'd been texting more. Every time, I'd watch Chloe's face do this strange thing, trying to smile through whatever was actually happening underneath it. One morning, I was grinning at my phone over a text from Megan, and Chloe practically lunged across the couch to see what I was looking at. "Who are you texting?" she asked, aiming for casual and missing by a mile. "Just Megan," I said. "She's into this show I recommended." Chloe's smile looked like it physically hurt to hold. "You two have been talking a lot lately." "Yeah, she's easy to talk to. Really gets me, you know?" After that, she started doing the thing where she'd accidentally glance at my phone whenever I left it lying around. She wasn't subtle about it. I'd catch her scrolling when she thought I was in the kitchen, and I made sure not to erase everything, just enough real, ordinary-looking text to keep her guessing without giving her anything solid to grab onto. Then she started showing up in places. I'd mention grabbing coffee near my office, and somehow she'd happen to be in the area. I'd say I was meeting friends at a bar, and an hour later, there she'd be, claiming she was just in the neighborhood. And strangest of all, she started canceling her own dates. Suddenly she wanted to be home more, wanted to cook dinner together, wanted movie nights like the ones we used to have before any of this started. It would have been almost sad, watching her try to reclaim territory she'd walked away from herself, if I hadn't spent the previous month watching her do the exact opposite to me without a second thought. Eventually, she just asked outright, "Are you seeing someone?" she said one evening, arms crossed, trying to sound like she wasn't bracing for the answer. "Isn't that the whole point of an open relationship?" I said. "Seeing other people? Is it Megan? Are you sleeping with Megan?" I just smiled and said I thought we weren't supposed to share details about other people we were seeing. Her rule, from the very beginning, the one she'd used every time I asked about her dates. That's when she really unraveled. She started going through my Instagram followers, checking who'd liked what, following Megan's account and reading into every post like it was evidence in a trial. And then Megan posted a selfie from the coffee shop near my office, the one I go to almost every morning, and Chloe called me at work in a full panic. "Are you with her right now?" "I'm at work, Chloe. That place has 1,000 customers a day. People go there without it meaning anything." She didn't believe a word of it, and honestly, by that point, I didn't need her to. A few days later, she came home and dropped a different kind of bomb. She sat me down on the couch, all serious concern, and told me she thought we should close the relationship again. "I think we've explored enough," she said, reaching for my hand. "We could go back to how things were. Just you and me." I pulled my hand back and actually laughed. "Just you and me. Like the last month didn't happen. Isn't that what you wanted? You haven't seemed happy. You're right, I said. I haven't been happy watching my girlfriend go on dates with a new guy every other night while barely looking at me the rest of the time. But that's fine, right? Because now I've been seeing someone too. Her face went white. Who? Does it matter? Isn't that the whole point? Both of us exploring, having new experiences? Of course it matters. Who is it? And then, slower, like she was doing the math out loud in real time. It's Megan, isn't it? That's why you two have been talking so much. That's why she hasn't been answering my calls. I didn't say anything. I let her get there herself. It is Megan, she said, voice climbing. She's my best friend. You can't sleep with my best friend. Actually, I said, standing up, I can. And I did. She stared at me like the words hadn't fully landed yet. What did you just say? I slept with Megan. More than once, actually. And it was good, Chloe. She actually pays attention to how I'm feeling, which is more than I can say for you lately. She went from shock to fury in about 2 seconds flat, grabbing her phone, presumably to call Megan directly and hear it denied. You're lying. She'd never do that. Check your texts with her, I said. Notice how distant she's been. That's why. She scrolled, frantic, finding exactly what I knew was there. The short replies, the unanswered messages, all the small distances Megan hadn't bothered hiding once she decided where she actually stood. This isn't how this was supposed to go, Chloe muttered, more to herself than to me. How was it supposed to go? I sit at home being the loyal boyfriend while you have your fun with whoever you want? Those guys didn't mean anything, she said. This is different. Real feelings. So that makes it worse, I said. You were having meaningless hookups while I actually developed real feelings for someone. When was the last time you and I had a conversation that wasn't about one of your dates? She sat down hard on the couch, and for the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely shaken instead of performing something for my benefit. So what? She said quietly. You want to be with her now? I'm saying this whole open relationship thing showed me exactly what I actually want. And it's not someone who treats me like an afterthought. She started crying, real, heavy crying, the kind that probably would have undone me a month earlier. But all I could think about was how she'd never once cried over what any of this had done to me. We can fix this, she said between sobs. We can go back. We can't, I said, because now I know what it feels like to be with someone who actually chooses me, and I'm not settling for less than that again. That's when she grabbed her keys and stormed out, saying she was going straight to Megan's to sort this out once and for all. The second the door slammed, I called Megan to warn her Chloe was on her way. Let her come, Megan said, calm in a way that honestly surprised me given what was headed toward her apartment. I've got this. I offered to come over, to be there in case things got ugly. She said no. This was between her and Chloe, 10 years of friendship on the line, and she felt like she owed it to that history to handle it herself. I spent the next hour pacing my apartment, checking my phone every few minutes, the whole place feeling like the air had gone heavy before a storm. When Megan finally called back, her voice was shaky. She showed up screaming, Megan said. My neighbors probably heard the whole thing. She kept saying I betrayed her, that I was a terrible friend, that I'd been plotting this the whole time. What did you tell her? The truth. That I've had feelings for you for years, that I never acted on them because she was my friend, and that watching her treat you the way she has this past month made me realize neither of us deserved to keep pretending everything was fine. Chloe apparently had not taken that well. She tried to push past Megan into the apartment, insisting she needed to see for herself if I was there. When Megan blocked the doorway, Chloe started rattling off every innocent interaction Megan and I had ever had, helping move a couch a year earlier, soup during a flu, movie nights at our place. Reframing every single one as proof of some long-running secret affair. She's completely lost it, Megan said quietly. She's convinced this has been going on for months. It hadn't. But by that point, I don't think the timeline mattered to Chloe as much as having a story that let her be the only wronged party in the whole thing. Chloe eventually left Megan's building. Not before a neighbor threatened to call the police over the noise, and came straight back to our apartment. She walked in while I was mid-text with Megan, and whatever composure she'd managed to hold on to in the car evidently didn't survive seeing my phone in my hand. "Are you texting her right now? Planning your next little meetup? How long have you two been laughing at me behind my back?" "Nobody's laughing at you, Chloe. You did this." "I didn't do anything," she snapped, throwing her purse across the room. "I suggested an open relationship to make us stronger. I didn't tell you to sleep with my best friend." "No," I said. "You just wanted permission to sleep with whoever you wanted while keeping me around as your backup plan." That landed. I watched it land. She started grabbing things. Framed photos of us, a jacket I'd given her, shoving them into a box like she needed her hands busy more than she needed them packed correctly. "I'm staying at Jessica's," she said. "Someone who wouldn't stab me in the back." "Fine," I said. "Take whatever you want." That stopped her for a second. "That's it? You're not even going to try to stop me?" "Why would I? You've made it pretty clear what actually mattered to you here, and it wasn't me." She sat down on the arm of the couch, suddenly small in a way I hadn't seen from her in weeks. "I thought you'd always just be there," she said quietly. "That no matter who else I was seeing, you'd be waiting whenever I was ready to settle back down." And there it was, the actual truth finally out in the open, weeks too late to change anything. I hadn't been her partner in this arrangement. I'd been her insurance policy. "You thought wrong," I told her. "I'm not a dog waiting by the door while you go have your fun. I'm a person, and I deserve better than being anyone's second choice." "You weren't my second choice. I love you." "No, Chloe. You love having me around when it's convenient. Those aren't the same thing." She cried again, but this time I felt nothing pulling me toward comforting her. Not guilt, not the old instinct to fix things. Just a strange, quiet emptiness where all of that used to live. "I'll come get the rest of my stuff tomorrow," she said, picking up her box. "I can't be here right now." After she left, I called Megan again. Just hearing her voice steadied something in my chest that had been unsteady for weeks. We talked for hours about Chloe, about what had happened, about what came next. She mentioned that some of their mutual friends had already started taking sides, most of them calling her a backstabber without knowing anything close to the full story. "I don't care," she said. "They can believe whatever they want. I know what actually happened." I looked around the apartment at the gaps where Chloe's things used to be, and realized underneath everything else, I felt relieved. Like I could finally take a full breath for the first time in a month. The next morning, Chloe came back for the rest of her stuff, this time with Jessica and two other friends I barely knew, all of them giving me looks like I was the villain of a story I hadn't gotten to help write. "The Xbox is mine," Chloe said, unplugging it without looking at me. "I bought it for your birthday." "Fine," I said. I was long past caring about the Xbox. Megan showed up halfway through, not planning to, but I texted her asking for coffee, and she'd read exactly what I meant by it. Chloe's friends went quiet and started whispering the second she walked in. "Really?" Chloe said. "You're going to flaunt this in my face?" "Nobody's flaunting anything," Megan said evenly, handing me the coffee. "I'm just here to support my boyfriend." First time either of us had used that word out loud. Chloe looked like she'd been slapped. The rest of the packing happened fast after that, her friends clearly trying to get her out before things got worse. On her way out the door, Chloe stopped for a second. "I really loved you," she said quietly. "No," I said. "You loved having me available whenever you wanted me there. There's a difference." Part 5. The days after Chloe left felt strange in a way I hadn't expected. Not painful exactly, more like the quiet after a long, loud storm, when you're not sure yet whether it's actually over or just pausing. Megan came by that evening to help me clean up the apartment, filling a donation box with the last of Chloe's things. A hoodie she'd never bothered claiming, a couple of books, a candle that had burned down to nothing months ago and never gotten replaced. "You okay?" Megan asked, watching me toss a photo frame into the box without much ceremony. "Yeah," I said, and meant it in a way that surprised me. For the first time in months, actually. We didn't rush into anything after that. I want to be clear about that because I know how this probably sounds from the outside. Guy sleeps with girlfriend's best friend. Relationship implodes. New couple moves in together within the week. Tidy little bow on the whole mess. That's not what happened. Megan and I took it slow, deliberately, both of us aware that whatever we'd started had been born out of something messy, and neither of us wanted to build something real on top of unresolved wreckage. We got coffee a few times that first week, nothing more. Talked on the phone most nights. She still had her own apartment, her own life, her classroom full of 6-year-olds and their crayon drawings, and I had my own half-emptied space to figure out how to live in again. About 10 days after Chloe moved out, Megan and I ran into a few of Chloe's friends at a coffee shop near campus. They saw us together, went stiff, and pointedly looked away for the rest of the time we were there. Megan just squeezed my hand under the table and kept talking like nothing had happened. "They've already decided their version," she said afterward, once we were back outside. "There's no point trying to argue with people who've already made up their minds." She was right, and honestly, by that point I didn't have much energy left to care what Chloe's circle thought had happened. I knew what had actually happened. Megan knew. That was enough. What surprised me most in those first few weeks wasn't the absence of Chloe. It was how much space that absence created. I hadn't realized how much of my daily rhythm had been quietly built around managing her moods, her schedule, her dates, the constant low-grade anxiety of never knowing where she actually was or who she was actually with. Once that pressure lifted, I had room again. Room to notice things. Room to actually be present in my own life instead of just monitoring someone else's. Megan noticed things too, small things Chloe never had. She noticed when I went quiet after a hard day at work and asked what was actually wrong instead of assuming I was fine because I said I was. She remembered that I hated cilantro without me ever having to repeat myself twice. She showed up one Tuesday with soup, unprompted, just because I'd mentioned feeling run down 2 days earlier. The same kind of thing she'd been doing for me all along, before either of us had put a name to what it actually was. About 3 weeks after everything blew up, I got a text from Chloe. Just one line. "Can we talk?" I sat with it for a while before responding. Not out of any lingering hope that there was something left to salvage. That ship had sailed the moment she'd admitted, out loud, that she'd expected me to just be waiting whenever she was done exploring. I responded mostly because I figured we still had logistics to sort out. A lease with both our names on it, a security deposit, the kind of practical loose ends that don't care how emotionally finished you are with someone. We met at a neutral coffee shop. Not the one near my office, not anywhere either of us had history with. She looked different. Tired in a way makeup couldn't quite cover, thinner, the specific exhaustion of someone who hasn't been sleeping well. "I've had some time to think," she said, wrapping both hands around her cup without drinking from it. "About all of it. About what I actually did." "Okay," I said and waited. I think I convinced myself that opening things up was about growth, about both of us getting something out of it. But if I'm honest with myself, I think I just wanted to feel wanted by more people, and I told myself a story where that was healthy instead of just selfish. I didn't say anything right away. Part of me wanted to feel some satisfaction hearing her finally admit it. Mostly I just felt tired, the way you feel tired after a long project finally wraps up. Relief more than triumph. "I'm not asking you to take me back," she added quickly, apparently reading something in my face. "I know that's not happening. I just needed to say that out loud to you directly. Not through Jessica, not through some group chat where everyone's already picked a side. Just to you." "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it, even though it didn't change anything material between us. "Are you happy?" she asked. "With Megan, I mean." I thought about it honestly before answering, because I didn't want to give her some performative line just to make a point. "I think I'm getting there," I said. "It's different. Slower. She actually notices things about me that you stopped noticing a long time before any of this started." Chloe nodded slowly, looking down at her cup. "That's fair," she said quietly. "I probably deserved to hear that." We finished the conversation covering the practical stuff. She'd take over the lease once I moved out, since I'd already decided I didn't want to stay in that apartment with all its old associations. We split what was left of our shared things without much argument. It was, in its own strange way, the most honest conversation we'd had in months, maybe longer. Walking out of that coffee shop, I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel much of anything toward Chloe at all, actually, which was its own kind of closure I hadn't expected to arrive so quietly. I moved into a new place about a month later. Small, one bedroom, nothing fancy, but entirely mine in a way the old apartment never quite managed to be even after 2 years of living there together. Megan helped me move the same way she'd once helped Chloe and me move into that first place. Except this time, when we finished carrying the last box up 3 flights of stairs, she stayed instead of going home. We officially started dating around then, though officially felt like a strange word for something that had already been quietly true for weeks. No dramatic conversation, no defining the relationship moment. Just one evening, unpacking boxes in my new kitchen, her asking if I wanted her toothbrush to just live there instead of going back and forth every few days, and me realizing I very much did. Word had gotten around the way it does. Chloe's friend group mostly closed ranks around her, which I understood, honestly, even if their version of the story left out most of the actual details. A few people reached out privately, though once enough time had passed for them to hear both sides. One of Chloe's coworkers, a woman named Priya who I'd met a handful of times at company parties, messaged Megan directly. She told me the whole story, Megan said. Reading the message aloud one night, Priya said Chloe's been telling people you two had been secretly seeing each other for months before anything happened, that we planned the whole thing together to hurt her. What did you say? I told her the truth, that nothing happened until after Chloe had been going on dates with strangers every other night for a month. That I only said anything to you because I couldn't watch her treat you like an afterthought anymore. Megan set the phone down. Priya believed me, for what it's worth. Said Chloe's been kind of a mess since it happened. Not eating much, barely going out. I felt something complicated hearing that. Not satisfaction exactly, but not sympathy either. Just a strange, flat acknowledgement that actions apparently do cost something, even when you convince yourself in the moment that they won't. Do you feel bad? I asked Megan. About the friendship? She thought about it for a long moment before answering, which I appreciated. She never gave me a quick, easy answer just to move a conversation along. Sometimes, she admitted. 10 years is a long time to just lose. But I keep coming back to the same thing. I didn't do this to hurt her. I did it because I'd spent years watching her not really see you, and then watching her actively use you as a fallback plan while she went out and lived exactly the life she wanted. At some point, protecting a friendship stops being worth protecting, if the person on the other end of it never really valued what she had. I understood that better than I probably let on. I'd spent 3 years assuming Chloe and I were building something solid, only to find out, in the space of about 6 weeks, that I'd actually been serving as insurance the whole time. Something reliable she could always fall back on if the exploring didn't pan out the way she hoped. Life settled, slowly, into something that actually felt like mine. Megan's classroom artwork ended up all over my new fridge within the first month. A lopsided sun, a family of stick figures she said one of her students insisted was you and Miss Megan and a dog we don't have yet, which made both of us laugh way harder than the joke probably warranted. We fell into routines that felt different from the ones I'd had with Chloe, not better or worse in some abstract sense, just more honest. Megan told me when she was annoyed instead of letting it curdle into something silent and passive. I found myself doing the same, saying things out loud that I would have swallowed for weeks with Chloe, waiting for some non-confrontational moment that usually never came. About 2 months after everything happened, I ran into Chloe once, entirely by accident, at a grocery store neither of us usually went to. We were both caught off guard enough that neither of us tried to duck into another aisle to avoid it. "Hey," she said, a little awkwardly, shifting her basket to her other arm. "Hey, how are you?" "Okay," she said. "Getting there, I think." She glanced at my cart, then back up at me. "You look good. Happier." "I am," I said, and there was no edge in it anymore, no urge to make the moment land a certain way for her benefit. It was just true. "I'm glad," she said, and I believed she meant it, even if it clearly cost her something to say. "I've been in therapy, actually, trying to figure out why I did what I did, why I needed all that attention from people who barely knew me instead of just being honest with you about whatever was actually missing." "That's good," I said, and I meant that too. "I hope you figure it out." "Yeah." She managed a small, tired smile. Me too. We didn't linger. We said a quick, easy goodbye and went back to our separate carts, separate lives, and I walked out of that store feeling nothing heavier than mild, distant goodwill toward someone I used to build a whole future around. That's the strange thing about a story like this. The ending isn't really about revenge, even though it might have started that way a little if I'm being fully honest with myself about those first few days of dropping Megan's name just to watch Chloe's face change. Somewhere along the way it stopped being about making her feel what she'd made me feel, and it became about something quieter and more permanent. Finding out what it actually feels like to be with someone who chooses you on purpose every day, instead of keeping you around as the fallback option while she figured out what she really wanted. 6 months after everything happened, Megan and I took a weekend trip. Nothing extravagant, just a small cabin a few hours outside the city, the kind of place with a fireplace that didn't quite work properly and a view of a lake that more than made up for it. We hadn't planned it as any kind of milestone. It was just a free weekend, both our schedules finally lining up, an itch to get out of the city for a couple of days. Sitting by that half-working fireplace on the first night, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of cedar, Megan brought up something I hadn't expected. "Do you ever think about how differently this could have gone?" she asked. "If I hadn't said anything that night, if I just kept sitting on it like I had for years." I thought about it honestly before answering. Sometimes, I admitted, I think about how long I probably would have stayed the way things were going, waiting for Chloe to snap out of it, telling myself I was being patient instead of just being used. "Do you regret how it happened?" she asked. "The timing, I mean, sleeping together before you'd actually ended things with her." It was a fair question, and one I'd turned over plenty of times myself in the months since. "I don't regret being with you," I said carefully. "I regret that it happened while I was still technically in something with her, even if that something had already stopped meaning anything real. I think if I could redo it, I'd have ended it with Chloe cleanly first, then figured out what was happening between us afterward. It would have been cleaner. Less ammunition for her to use in her version of the story." Megan nodded slowly, staring into the fire. "I've thought about that too. I don't regret telling you how I felt. I regret that it happened in a way that let her frame the whole thing as some big betrayal, instead of what it actually was, the natural result of her spending a month treating you like you didn't matter." "Does it matter, though?" I asked. "The framing? We both know what actually happened." "It mattered to me for a while," she admitted. "Losing a 10-year friendship over it, even one that clearly wasn't as solid as I thought, that's not nothing. I went through my own version of grieving it, honestly. Just quieter than yours, I think, because I felt like I didn't have the right to be as upset, given that I was the one who chose to act on it." That was the first time she'd said that so plainly, and it made me realize how much of her side of this I'd overlooked while I was busy processing my own. She hadn't just gained something out of that mess. She'd lost something real too. A decade of history, gone in a single confrontation on her own doorstep. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't think I ever actually said that. I got so wrapped up in what I was going through. I don't think I ever asked what it cost you." "You don't need to apologize," she said. "I made my own choice. I think it's worth naming sometimes that good things can come out of situations that still hurt somebody along the way. Doesn't make it simple." We sat with that for a while, the fire popping occasionally, the lake outside dark and still. It was one of those conversations that didn't resolve into some neat lesson. Just an honest acknowledgement that the story we'd ended up in together had cost something real, even as it had given us both something we hadn't let ourselves imagine wanting before. By the time we drove back to the city that Sunday, something between us had settled into place a little more firmly. Not because of some big declaration, we hadn't even used the word love yet, actually, though it was clearly sitting there, unsaid, in most of our conversations by that point. Just because we'd finally talked honestly about the messiest part of how we started, instead of quietly agreeing not to look at it too closely. A few weeks after that trip, I heard through the grapevine. Priya again, still occasionally passing things along to Megan even though her own loyalty had clearly landed with us by then, that Chloe had started seeing someone new. Someone steady, apparently. A guy from her gym, nothing dramatic, no dating apps or rotating cast of strangers. Priya said Chloe seemed different with him. Quieter, more present. Like whatever she'd been chasing during those months of dates had finally either been found or given up on. I hoped that was true. I want to be honest about that because I think it matters for how this story actually ends. I didn't want Chloe to suffer forever as some kind of ongoing punishment for what she'd done. I wanted her to actually learn something from it, the same way I had, the same way Megan had, each of us walking away from that mess having had to look honestly at parts of ourselves we might not have examined otherwise. That's the thing nobody really tells you about a betrayal like that one. It doesn't just break the thing that broke. It forces everyone standing near it to take a hard, unflattering look at themselves, what they were willing to tolerate, what they were willing to risk, what they actually wanted underneath all the reasons they told themselves for staying quiet as long as they had. Chloe learned, apparently, that she'd been chasing attention instead of honesty, and that no number of dates with strangers could fill whatever gap she'd actually been trying to fill. I learned that I'd been mistaking patience for love for longer than I wanted to admit, that waiting quietly for someone to notice you isn't the same thing as being valued, no matter how long you convince yourself it is. And Megan learned, I think, that choosing honesty over comfort, even when it costs you something as real as a 10-year friendship, is usually still worth it in the end, even if the cost doesn't fully stop hurting just because the outcome turns out well. A year to the day after that first dinner where Chloe put her fork down and asked what I'd think about opening the relationship, Megan and I sat at that same restaurant. Not on purpose, we hadn't even realized the date until we were already seated, looking at a menu that suddenly felt strangely familiar. "Isn't this the place?" Megan asked, glancing around. "Where she brought it up?" "Yeah," I said, and laughed a little, because a year earlier, sitting in that same booth, I couldn't have imagined ending up here with her on the other side of it. "Weird full circle," she said. "Good weird, though." She smiled and reached across the table for my hand, the same gesture Chloe had made a year earlier while asking me to agree to something I never actually wanted. The difference this time was that I wasn't performing agreement to keep the peace. I was just there, fully, with someone who'd never once made me feel like a fallback option. I'd moved on from thinking about Chloe much at all by that point. Not out of bitterness, just because life had genuinely filled back in around the space she used to occupy, the way it does when enough time passes and you stop checking for the shape of what used to be there. Megan's classroom artwork still covered my fridge, rotating out every few weeks for a fresh batch. We'd built small routines of our own. A Sunday morning coffee ritual that had nothing to do with pancakes or performance, just two people who genuinely liked spending slow mornings together. Her kindergartners had apparently started asking if Miss Megan's boyfriend was coming to the class holiday party, which felt like its own strange, sweet marker of how far things had come from that first uneasy dinner conversation. I think about the whole arc of it sometimes, usually not with any particular emotion attached anymore. Just the way you think back on a chapter of your life that's genuinely closed. Chloe wanted permission to feel wanted by more people than just me, and instead of being honest about that need, she wrapped it in language about growth and exploration that let her avoid admitting what she actually wanted, which was attention without accountability. I gave her that permission reluctantly because I was too afraid of losing her to say no. And in trying to hold on to something that was already slipping, I ended up finding something I hadn't even known I was looking for. Someone who'd been quietly, patiently there the entire time, waiting not for her turn with me, but for the moment it would actually be honest to say something. I don't know if I'd call any of it revenge. Looking back now, even though it started that way, those first few days of dropping Megan's name just to watch Chloe's composure crack a little more each time. That part of it, I'll admit, felt good in a way I'm not particularly proud of. But it burned off fast, replaced by something that mattered more. The slow, unglamorous work of actually building something real with someone who chose me on purpose, every single day, instead of keeping me in reserve while she figured out what she really wanted from everyone else. Chloe, from what I still hear occasionally, seems to be doing okay. Genuinely okay, not just performing it the way she used to perform contentment during those weeks of dates and late nights. I hope that's true. I mean that without irony. Whatever she put me through, I don't need her to keep suffering for it indefinitely to feel like the story landed somewhere fair. She got exactly what her choices led to. The loss of a relationship she'd assumed would just wait for her. And a decade-long friendship she hadn't valued as much as she thought she had until it was already walking out her door. Megan and I, meanwhile, are still exactly where we ended up that night on her couch. Just older now, more sure of it. No open relationship. No dating apps. No permission slips dressed up as growth. Just two people who found each other in the wreckage of something that was never really built to last, and decided deliberately to build something that was. If there's a lesson in any of this, and I've had a full year to think about whether there is one, I think it's this: when someone asks for freedom inside a relationship, pay attention not to what they say they want, but to how quickly they use it and how little they seem to notice what it costs the person standing next to them while they're out enjoying it. That imbalance tells you everything you actually need to know, usually long before the rest of the story catches up to it. I found that out the hard way. But I found my way to the right ending anyway. Just not the one I originally thought I was signing up for. Story end.